At the edge of Black Mesa, where the wind claws at the rock face and the sunset stretches like a dark red blade, there stands a small wooden cabin tucked among the old pine trees. No nameplate, no porch light, only faded horse tracks beneath the sand and the crackling voice of a weather report from Ranger Station 12 on an old radio. Inside the cabin, Citlali Redhawk folded a tattered paper map, her eyes never leaving the burning end of a cigarette in a dented tin ashtray. The sun outside burned like molten iron, but her gaze was harder still, deep and cold like the nights she once endured in Kuna, where no one called her name, except for blood. Citlali didn't like strangers, and it seemed the land didn't either. The desert knew who came to strip it bare, and who came to keep it alive. Citlali was the latter. She had once been a recon sergeant in a peacekeeping force, a quiet shadow in nameless, faceless operations, but on some rocky hill more than 11,000 miles from home. Her commanding officer ordered her left behind after shrapnel tore through her side. She survived, but from that day forward, trust was no longer something she carried in her pack. Every morning, Citlali rose before dawn, not to stand watch, but because the darkness was the only thing she felt in full control of. She split firewood with an axe, checked corral wires with bare hands, and brewed black coffee using boiling spring water in a cracked silver kettle. Ranger Station still sent daily bulletins, but she never filed a report longer than 15 words. Dust storm, winds level 3, south tent post collapsed. That was it. People at the station called her the Mute Hawk. They didn't know Citlali had once been the most talkative in her unit, until her younger brother, Nathan, was shot dead on their ancestral land. A so-called mistaken self-defense case that was dismissed in under 2 hours in an all-white court. She had not spoken since. She shaved her head, carved a blade line across her right arm. The first blood spilled after the funeral was her own. Black Mesa never asked why anyone came, but it had its ways of testing them. Those who lacked patience left after the first summer, when the winds burned like fire and venomous snakes slithered into sleeping bags. But Citlali stayed. Every scar, every stiffened knuckle was a vow to the land. I don't leave people behind, even if they left me. She lived that way, in silence, shadow, and ash, until one day, after a night of rain, a new hoofprint appeared in the sand. Not human, not wolf, horse, large, deep, and walking straight toward her cabin, as if it was looking for someone. A swirl of wind slipped through the door crack. Citlali looked up, and for the first time in many months, her eyes widened, as if the desert had just spoken her name in a voice she'd long forgotten. The next morning, when the mist still clung to the air like the last breath of night, Citlali stepped out of the cabin with a handgun on her hip and the dagger her father once forged beneath the old eucalyptus tree. The corral wires were intact, the cabin undisturbed, but that hoofprint was still there. Not faded. 4 deep imprints, the edges soft with mud, proof that the animal hadn't been running but standing. Standing there for quite a while. Watching, silent like a spirit that knows how to wait. Citlali knelt down, lightly touched the center of the print. Mustang, she whispered. She knew them. The ancient wild horses, descendants of the few herds that survived extinction, cold-blooded and wiser than the domesticated kind. And if this truly was a Mustang, then it was no ordinary one. No wild horse dared approach humans, especially not in a region sprayed with defoliants since the 1970s. And if it came, for her? The thought made Citlali shiver. That entire morning, she did nothing but follow the remaining hoofprints, trailing along the creek, weaving through patches of bluish grass, and stopping at the base of a curved rock wall where the wind often howled like a funeral flute. There were no more tracks. As if the horse had vanished into the wind. Citlali stood there for a long while, eyes fixed on the empty space. She didn't speak, but her fingers brushed the pendant at her neck, a silver charm engraved with a lightning bolt across an arrow. An ancestral symbol, a sign of one who carries storms in their heart but knows when to let the rain fall. A faint sound stirred behind her. She spun around, her hand already on the grip of her gun. No one there, just a strong gust of wind, but it carried the sound of hooves. Distant, echoing, then gone. That night, she didn't lock the door, didn't turn on the light. She simply left a carrot on the porch step, A habit from back when she had her first horse named Smoke. When she was only 11. The night passed slower than usual. Her coffee went cold. The flashlight beam showed nothing in the woods but mist. But by morning, the carrot was gone. And on the dusty ground before the step, a hoofprint larger than the one from yesterday. Sharper. As if it had come back. Come closer. And quietly left again. No chewing. No stomping. Just stood there. Citlali looked at the hoofprint and gave a faint smile. The wind swept through her hair, lifting a few strands like a whisper. Storm, she murmured. If that's your name, then I'll wait. But not to break you. I'm a wanderer too, untethered like you. She stepped back inside the cabin and, for the first time in years, wrote a new line in her old journal. Day 381 at Black Mesa. Someone, or something, still knows the way back, even when the wind has changed. Out there, between the shadows of pine and wind-blown sand, Storm watched from afar, ears upright, breath steaming in the cold air. It wasn't ready to come closer. But it had chosen who to return to. The following week, everything seemed to move slower. The winds of Black Mesa shifted unpredictably, carrying the scent of damp earth and slicing gusts from the east, a direction where, according to the map, there was no official path. Citlali noticed this more than once. She tracked the wind, redrew the trails with charcoal on bark. Along every old hoofprint Storm had left, if it was indeed the same horse, there was something off. Not in the tracks themselves, but in the way they led. Too straight, too deliberate, as if someone, or something, wanted to lure her in. Early that week, the central station issued an irregular patrol order from Supervisor Brooks. His voice came through the radio like always, thick, smooth, emotionless. Citlali, Eastern Route 7 shows signs of a smoldering fire from satellite imagery. The old trail is temporarily closed due to topographic misalignment. Take Ridge Trail. Leave the drone at the station. Submit end-of-day report. Citlali stayed silent. Something was off. Ridge Trail had been a dead end since last year, rockslide damage. And why not take the drone if there was a fire risk? She didn't object, but before leaving, she stepped into the supply room, where Maria Torres was checking the shift log. Maria looked at her, eyebrows tightening. Brooks again. Huh? That doesn't sound right. Citlali didn't answer immediately. Instead, she pulled an original map from the bottom drawer, hand-drawn. Outdated, but accurate down to every ridge. Give me the backup radio, Citlali said, voice low but firm. Maria understood instantly. Didn't ask. She pulled a small radio from her jacket and slipped it into Citlali's hand, along with a scrap of paper bearing one line. If the wind changes direction, don't turn back. Just keep going. I'll follow. Citlali left the station at dusk. The sun pierced sideways through the rocky spires, painting the forest in scorched bronze. She didn't take the main trail. She followed Ridge Trail, the same path that nearly killed her in a landslide 3 years ago. Back then, she survived by tumbling into a ravine, breaking 2 ribs. Today, that place was dry and eerily quiet. But what waited ahead was stranger. Beneath an old pinon tree, she found a military bootprint. Not ranger boots, not hiker soles, but deep, precise prints, the kind seen only at military outposts. Beside it, an empty shell casing, and next to that, a hoofprint. Storm. Her instincts kicked in. Citlali turned, pulled out the backup radio, tapped it 3 times, no signal. She took a step back, then heard the faint scrape of metal against leather. Behind her, a low voice, unfamiliar, but recognizable in its cadence. You came sooner than I thought. Redhawk. A man in forest camo stood less than 3 meters away, half his face covered by a scarf. In his hand, a silenced pistol, aimed squarely at her chest. Behind him, 2 others appeared, one coiling a length of rope, the other holding a cloudy syringe. No fire, no emergency, only a trap. Citlali said nothing, but her hand hovered near the dagger's hilt, eyes lowered like a wild wolf ready to strike. The wind rose, stones tumbled, a horse's scream echoed from the distance. The man chuckled. Looks like your friend's here too. Don't worry, we've got plans for both of you. Then everything went black. Before she could draw her weapon, the first thing Citlali felt when she woke up wasn't pain. It was cold, a damp, seeping cold like blood-soaked stone, creeping from her back slowly into her spine. She opened her eyes. The world was upside down. The deep blue sky shimmered above, but instead of beneath her feet. It hung overhead. Her hands were bound tightly behind her back, wrists bleeding from the paracord tied too cruelly. Her entire body dangled upside down from a rotting pinon branch, suspended over a jagged canyon below, a bed of sharp rocks like the ancient blades of her ancestors. A long gust of wind. The branch creaked, a dry, brittle sound. Citlali clenched her teeth, turned her head. A small camera was fixed to the tree trunk. A red light blinked. They were recording her death, probably as a message. Or worse, for sale. Her scrambled memories began to clarify. The man with the scarf. The military shell casing. The fake patrol order. The hoof print. Storm. Her heart pounded harder as she recalled the neigh. If Storm came closer, they'd shoot. If he left, she would die. But what if he was coming for her? The wind shifted again. The branch swayed violently. A wave of nausea rose in her throat. But she didn't cough, didn't tremble, didn't groan. A soldier doesn't give the world the sound of their last weak breath. Suddenly, thump, a faint noise at the forest's edge. Not a gun, not the wind, but the clink of a hoof on stone. Storm. At first, just a smoky gray blur slipping through the low pine scrub. Ears perked, neck arched, eyes glowing like smoldering coals. He didn't gallop. He moved forward, steady, purposeful, as if he knew exactly where to go. A guard appeared from the rim of the slope. He raised his gun, cursed. "What the hell are you?" Storm didn't stop. He let out a shriek, half wind, half flame, a sound ancient, defiant, like a battle cry from before memory. Then, with one explosive lunge, he charged. The guard didn't even pull the trigger before Storm struck, hurling him off the ground, slamming him into a pine tree behind. The man collapsed. His gun spun across the rocks, landed silently. Storm turned, shrieked again. The branch above began to splinter with the shifting wind. Citlali looked down. The horse's eyes locked onto hers. No reins, no commands, just one look. "I'm here. And I know what to do." Storm stepped toward the branch, clenched the rope in his teeth. He pulled, then yanked, then twisted, cutting into his own gums. Blood oozed, but he didn't let go. The branch cracked again. This time, for real. Crack. The rope snapped. Citlali's body dropped, fast, like a broken arrow. But Storm reared back, kicked both hind legs at the precise moment the rope gave, altering her fall. She hit the edge of a rocky ledge, skidded along the cliff face, blood streaking across her brow, then lay still. Storm rushed forward, nudged her shoulder with his forehead. Once, twice. Suddenly, Citlali coughed, choked on blood, and opened her eyes. Storm stood over her, panting, chest heaving. Citlali reached up, trembling, and touched his neck. For the first time, horse and human needed no reins. Only trust. From the top of the slope, another guard shouted, "She's alive, damn it, shoot the horse." But it was too late. Citlali had already climbed onto Storm's back. No saddle, no stirrups, only blood, fury, and a path carved by hooves and loyalty. Storm neighed one final time before plunging into the shadowed forest, carrying the woman who had once died beneath the earth, and now returned like fire rising from ash. The wind screamed past her ears like the howls of her ancestors. Pine branches lashed her face, leaving red welts bleeding across Citlali's cheek. But she didn't stop, and neither did Storm. The two of them moved as one, horse and human. No reins, no map, only the primal instinct to survive and the urgent call of the land. Behind them, gunfire cracked violently. Bullets tore into tree trunks, shredding pine bark like the enraged screams of a predator that had lost its prey. One bullet zipped past Citlali's left ear, burning like fire. She pressed herself low over Storm's neck, bloodied hand gripping his mane. Each of Storm's strides forced her to balance more with will than strength. Blood from her left shoulder wound soaked through her shirt, dripping onto Storm's back like a vow made in blood. A voice screamed from behind, "Shoot it down, don't let that horse get away." Another round slammed into the dirt, missing Storm's hooves by less than a hand's breadth. But the horse didn't veer, didn't falter. His eyes were bloodshot, ears upright, listening to even the faintest crack in the woods. He wasn't running just to survive. He was running for her. They tore through White Bone Valley, once a chemical weapons testing ground, where people said nothing could live. But Citlali knew, strange grasses still grew there. And if a horse could smell, he would know the safe path. Storm did not fail. He chose the left fork, skirted the dead grass, and charged down a slope leading to a cave only the native elders still remembered. Suddenly, a sharp bend. Citlali shouted, "Right!" Storm lunged, swerved, but it was too late to dodge everything. A deafening bang exploded above the cliff. Citlali felt her shoulder burst into flame. She'd been shot. This time, it hit. Her body lurched, slumped to the side, nearly falling off Storm's back. But Storm sensed it. He reared hard, tilted, catching her weight. Citlali clung to his neck with her remaining hand. Lips clenched, eyes blurred with blood. They reached the cave's entrance. Storm skidded to a halt. He let out a furious scream, the roar of a creature once wild. Nearly broken by man, now returned to strike at everything that had ever tried to tame him. Outside, the pursuers arrived, 2 men, guns raised. But Storm backed into the shadows. And Citlali, barely upright despite the blood loss, drew the dagger her father had forged, cold steel flashing in the heart of the black forest. The wind changed. The scent of blood spread. But the hunters didn't dare enter the cave. Because they knew, whatever was inside, was no longer prey. The darkness inside the cave was thick like tar. The scent of damp stone, dry moss, and the faint drip of blood onto rock created a stifling atmosphere, part living, part dead. Storm exhaled heavily, steam rising from his sweaty coat in the cold. He lowered his head gently, allowing Citlali to slide down. She slumped against the wall, trembling hands clawing at a cracked vein in the rock to stay conscious. The bullet had pierced her shoulder blade, not deep, but bleeding heavily. She drew the dagger her father had forged, cut her shirt sleeve, and used the cloth to wrap the wound. With each tightening of the bandage, her vision blurred further. A wave of dizziness crashed over her, pulling her into an old memory. Long ago, in a cave like this one, her mother had led her there. Fleeing a wildfire, her mother said, "A cave isn't a place to hide. It's a place to transform. If you leave this cave, you cannot be weaker than when you entered." Citlali's hand clenched tighter. She turned to Storm. The horse never took his eyes off the cave entrance. He stood like a trained warrior, chest high, nostrils flaring with every scent drifting in from the forest beyond. "Storm," Citlali rasped, "I don't know why you chose me. But if you did, I won't let you walk alone." She pulled a piece of charcoal from her pocket and wrote 2 words on the stone wall. "Storm, bloodbound." Then, she drew her knife and sliced a small line on her palm. Blood dripped to the ground. Storm stepped forward, sniffed. Then he bent his legs and knelt. Not a gesture from a wild horse, but an answer. No words, no whips, just a drop of blood, a shared look, and a vow between 2 beings once hunted. "I won't let you die. And you won't let me give up." A sound echoed from outside, the crunch of footsteps. Then voices. "They couldn't have gotten far. I'm sure they're hiding nearby." Citlali signaled. Storm backed deeper into the shadows. She unhooked the dagger from her belt, gripped a sharp rock in her other hand. The blood still flowed. Her heart pounded like a war drum. Another step. Then a flashlight beam swept across the mouth of the cave. Storm backed farther, held his breath. Citlali tensed. A taut bowstring. The wind hissed. A branch snapped. One of the soldiers hesitated. "Hey, this place is weird. Looks like some native cave. I don't want to mess with spiritual stuff." The other one laughed. "You afraid of ghosts now? I'm afraid of things that don't need guns to make people disappear." They retreated, silently turned away. When the footsteps finally faded, Citlali collapsed against Storm's flank. Gasping, she lived. Storm lived. But this wasn't the end. This was where the forest guardian and the wild Mustang became one. Not just to hide, but to prepare to return. With fire, with evidence, and with the righteous fury of someone who's been silent for far too long. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Tomorrow, Storm, we go back." Dawn fell over Black Mesa like a gilded blade, sharp, cold, and merciless. The sky shifted from ashen gray to pale blue, then cracked open as if the earth itself was parting its lips to speak a prophecy. Citlali rose from the darkness. The blood on her shoulder had dried, but there was no trembling in her gaze. Storm still stood at the mouth of the cave, silent sentinel, ears tuned to every whisper of movement. She stood, spine straight, legs shaky but will sharp as the blade her father once forged. Today, no one would hide. Not Citlali. Not Storm. Not the truth. She pulled a satellite phone from her boot, an anti-jamming relic. Nearly extinct. Typed the startup code. The screen glowed a soft blue. First message sent. Maria, I'm alive. But what I found, it's national level. Prepare every channel. Every piece of evidence. We're on the move. Second message. Sent with a video. Surveillance footage abruptly cut at the ranger station. Doctored satellite images. Audio captured from her emergency device. Supervisor Brooks giving a false patrol order. Enough to ignite a political wildfire at the state level. Third message. Never sent. She typed it, then deleted it. Mama, I'm coming home. Storm lowered himself as she climbed on. No saddle. No armor. Just blood, vengeance, and truth in her grip. She gave a gentle nudge with her heels. Storm launched into the valley. The wind whipped through her tangled hair, each wound stinging like fire. But inside her chest, only one heartbeat pulsed. Give the forest back its name. Give voice to the silenced. They crossed a dry creek. Citlali stopped at a great rock, once an altar for the Dinah people. She placed her hand on its surface. Whispered, grant me the clarity of the ancestors. Give Storm the feet of the storm. And to the traitors, let them tremble when their masks are torn. She struck a match and lit a scrap of paper, the map Brooks once handed her. The flame flared red hot, then crumbled to ash. Storm reared back, unleashing a cry, a wild, thunderous scream that echoed across Black Mesa like a war cry. They pressed on. The forest parted ahead, revealing the ranger station, a scar that never healed. There stood Brooks, in a meeting with strange men. Military trucks, flags without insignia, and among them, familiar faces. The ones who'd raised their guns. The ones who'd hunted her. Citlali didn't stop. She rode into the station's courtyard. Storm kicking up red dust like funeral flames. All voices fell silent. Brooks turned, face ashen. You were dead. Citlali tossed a USB drive to the ground. Wrong. It's you who's about to die. Die by truth. Die by thinking the forest could be bought and sold. Maria stepped forward from behind the station, flanked by 3 other rangers. They raised their phones, live streaming. Cameras recording every second. The network was live. Citlali's voice. The blood staining her shoulder. Storm standing like a living spirit of the land. It all became an undeniable truth. The wind rose. Fires still burned in the distant woods. But this time, no one called for soldiers to put them out. Because this fire was truth. And Citlali was the one who lit it. The sunset bled across the sky like a quiet storm of blood spilling over Black Mesa. In the courtyard of the ranger station, the wind carried the scent of ash and something deeper. The scent of a truth on the verge of being set free. Citlali stood face to face with Supervisor Brooks. Her spine straight, her wounds bound, her blood no longer flowing. But the fire in her eyes had never stopped burning. Storm stood beside her, silent, steady, like the shadow of a storm that had not yet thundered. Maria and her loyal rangers pointed their cameras at Brooks. Hundreds watched the livestream. Comments flooded the screen. What's going on? Is that Storm? She's alive? Brooks swallowed hard. He was no longer the commanding man of authority he once pretended to be. His collar was crumpled, his eyes twitching. You don't understand the bigger picture. Citlali, this isn't just about the forest. Citlali cut in, her voice sharp as a jungle blade. No, this is about every stolen acre. Every animal driven into fire. And every soul, like Storm, imprisoned, branded, and used in your gene-coded domestication programs. Brooks froze. How do you know about that? Citlali held up a worn leather strap. Attached to it, a GPS microchip, pulled from beneath Storm's mane. I have enough to make you lose your chair. And I know more than you think. A ranger stepped forward from behind, handing over a decrypted file. Classified documents from Project Equinox X, a covert bioweapons initiative disguised as wildlife conservation, designed to turn creatures like Storm into territorial control tools for future conflict zones. Citlali looked Brooks dead in the eye. Storm was the first victim. And the last. At that moment, Storm let out a cry. Not rage, not pain, but something deeper. A sound like closure. From the edge of the forest, they appeared. Ash-gray Mustangs, emerging through the mist like the ghosts of ancestors. Storm's eyes lit up. He had called them. His herd. His blood. His memory. Brooks panicked. No, they can't. They were lost. They were sterilized. Maria spoke coldly. No one has the right to sterilize nature. Citlali, never taking her eyes off Storm, whispered. He remembered. He never forgot. And now he leads them home. Storm stepped forward. Citlali said nothing, only placed a hand gently on his brow. As soft as a farewell. As the herd surrounded the station, Brooks ran, but Storm did not chase. He turned, leading the herd back into the depths of Black Mesa, to a place no human had walked in decades. Maria watched them disappear and murmured, "We just witnessed something older than the law." Citlali nodded. Something called justice. That night, news swept the state. Brooks was arrested. Project Equinox X opened to federal investigation. But for Citlali, the greatest victory didn't come in a courtroom. It came in Storm's final cry, echoing deep within the forest, where man cannot follow, where freedom does not ask permission. 10 days after the standoff, Black Mesa lay in an eerie silence. No sirens, no patrol helicopters, only the wind threading through red stone crevices. Only pine needles whispering like the forest itself was finally given back its true name. Citlali stood before her ranger tent, the makeshift shelter she had once put up for a few weeks of surveying, which had, in the end, kept her for more than a year. She looked around and slowly packed her things. A scorched corner map, her father's old knife, a notebook filled with field notes, a dented silver flask, but one thing she could not take with her. Storm. The ash-gray Mustang had vanished into the forest with his herd that very night. As if he had never belonged here. Never belonged to anyone. But Citlali knew. They had been bonded. In a way that no word, no language, could ever fully explain. The Ranger Service offered her a medal. The press wanted interviews. A director from Los Angeles emailed her, asking her to consult on a film about the defiant Ranger. She turned them all down. Because some victories are not meant to be captured by a lens, but by red dust caked on worn boots, and the breath of a horse that once knelt at the scent of blood. That afternoon, with everything packed, Citlali stepped out of her tent one last time. And then she stopped, right at the threshold, a single silver-gray feather. Long, smooth as silk, untouched by dirt, unmarked by hooves. Storm had returned, not to meet her, not to stay, but to leave behind one thing. The memory of something that had been real. Citlali picked up the strand, and something stirred deep inside her. She tied it to her silver necklace, right beside the thunderbolt and arrow symbols passed down from her ancestors. Then she climbed into her truck, and did not look back. Because those who truly belong to a place do not need to turn around to remember. They have carved their name into the wind. That night, a new group of rangers arrived to rebuild the station. They said that as they crossed into White Bone Valley, they saw hoofprints, forming a perfect circle, like an ancient mark, then vanishing beyond the horizon. One ranger asked, "Do wild horses really leave signs like that?" Another answered, "Not for us, but for the ones who once rode with them. To let them know, they chose right." The noise of the city wasn't like the forest. It didn't slice through the ears like wind. It crept into the heart like a strange drumbeat, making each footstep on the pavement feel foreign, echoing and hollow. Citlali stepped out of Santa Fe's central train station. Her backpack still carried the dust of Black Mesa. And around her neck, the necklace with Storm's hair brushed against her collarbone every time she took a deep breath. The city hadn't changed much. The buildings still stood stiff like artificial cliffs. The lights still flickered like sleepless fireflies. But inside Citlali, everything had changed. She returned to the small apartment she once rented before she left. A space now covered in a thin coat of dust. As if even time had paused, waiting for her return. She turned on the light, looked around, then opened the window. Wind rushed in, not mountain wind, no pine resin, no red dust, but wind, nonetheless. She gave a faint smile and sank into the old chair, meaning to brew a pot of tea. Then, her phone vibrated. An unknown number. Washington, D.C. area code. She hesitated for a beat, then answered. Hello. This is Jennifer Cole from the Federal Commission on Wildlife and Wilderness Preservation. I hope I'm not disturbing you. Citlali raised an eyebrow. No, but I'm surprised. We've reviewed your entire investigation. What you and Storm did. The Inspector General would like to meet you. Not to praise you, but to listen. Citlali gripped the phone a little tighter. Listen to what? To how you see the forest. Not as a resource to extract, but as a living soul. There was a pause on the other end. Then the voice continued. And, we're currently discussing a seat on the Advisory Council to redefine Southwestern conservation policy. A special appointment. We'd like you to consider it. Silence. Citlali looked out the window, where only a few stars pierced through the haze of high rises. An advisory position? After all the times her voice had been silenced. Now they wanted her at the table where decisions were made. She thought of Storm, of blood on cave stone, of the cry that echoed in the deep forest, of the silver strand that now rested against her skin. I'm not a politician, she said softly. We know. That's exactly why we need you. A pause. Then she exhaled, closed her eyes. Fingers curled around the strand of Storm's hair once more. I'll think about it. But if I come, I'm not coming alone. You mean, I bring the forest, and its voice. She ended the call. There was no need to answer right away. Because those who truly understand the forest always wait for the signal from the wind, not from politics. Washington, D.C. was unlike any place Citlali had ever known. Here, the wind didn't carry the scent of earth. It smelled of paper, ink, and the quiet weight of power sealed behind polished wooden doors. She wore a simple blue shirt, her hair braided neatly, the necklace with Storm's silver hair still at her collar. To others, it looked like a wild talisman. To her, it was a reminder of blood, of land, and of freedom. The hearing was held in the domed chamber of the Federal Commission on Conservation. At the front, digital maps showed the Black Mesa region and proposed adjustments to the wildlife corridors across the Southwest. There were dozens of delegates, biologists, policymakers, Pentagon representatives. But when Citlali stepped forward, the room fell completely silent. She didn't use slides. No laptop. Just two objects placed before her. An old hand-drawn map, sketched by her ancestors, marking sacred lines of the land, and a small bundle of dried grass wrapped in red cloth. Then she spoke. Storm was a horse, but he wasn't just a horse. He was a witness, a descendant of a bloodline that survived war, wildfires, and the betrayal of mankind. They caged Storm, tagged him, chipped him, called him an experiment. But Storm never lashed out. He chose to return, led his kin into the forest, and refused to become any symbol, other than freedom. One delegate finally asked, "You mean to suggest that animal understood its role?" Citlali smiled, not with sarcasm, but as if to ask a deeper question in return. More than some people in this very room. A murmur. But no one objected. She continued, I didn't come here to request a new law. I came to remind you. The forest needs no protection, if people remember their vows. And no creature needs rescuing, if we are not the predators. Storm doesn't need his name etched on any plaque. But I've drawn him onto this map, not to claim him, but to step back, to leave space where nature has the right not to be touched. A minute after her final words, the entire hall rose to its feet. Not in full agreement, but they had heard her. And none could pretend they hadn't. That night, headlines spread across major news outlets. Ranger from Black Mesa redefines conservation, with a single strand of horsehair. On the revised ecological zoning map, the valley where Storm had once stood was marked with a blank space. No name, no code, just a small lightning bolt symbol. A silent reminder of a spirit who passed through and left freedom behind. That night, Citlali left D.C. No gala, no interviews. She returned to the deserts of New Mexico, where the stars still breathed, and at the edge of a small town. As her car paused beside a quiet hill, A distant whinny rose from the direction of Black Mesa. She smiled. Storm hadn't left. He was just waiting for her to come home. The sun had not yet fully risen when Citlali set foot once more on the red earth of Black Mesa. There were no signs of the old ranger station. No fences. No warning boards that read, "Restricted area." Only earth, stone, and wind, as free as the first day she arrived. She carried no weapon, no map. The only thing that remained on her was the necklace. The strand of Storm's hair. Still soft as the day she first held it. Though time had rushed by like a flash flood. She crossed the old canyon pass. Where patrolmen once blocked the way. A narrow path had been cleared. By the Dinah people themselves. Etched into a stone was a new hand-carved symbol. A circle pierced by a lightning bolt. A sign of protection not built through force, but through understanding. Citlali laid her hand upon the stone. Feeling warmth still lingering from yesterday's sun. She walked on, past the dry creek, past the fallen pines, past the clearing where she had once collapsed. Blood seeping from her shoulder. And then, she heard hoofbeats. Storm didn't appear like a miracle. He appeared the way things are meant to appear. When they belong. From afar, the wild herd flowed like wind. But Storm stood still. His eyes met Citlali's, not like a creature to its keeper. Or a human to a beast. But like two souls who had once walked the same path. Now meeting again at their final fork. She stepped closer. No hand reached out to pet him. No saddle was raised. She simply stood there. "I'm home," she said softly. Storm took one step forward, bowing his head slightly. A gesture, like a greeting. There was no need to ride anymore. Because Citlali was no longer a ranger. Nor a guardian of the forest. She was part of it. Down at the base of the hill, Maria and a group of tribal elders were raising a new sign. Black Mesa Sanctuary for Living Beings. No fences. No admission. No surveillance drones. Only a single line etched into a weathered bronze plate. For those who know how to listen. And are patient enough not to touch freedom. That evening, fire was lit in the valley. No speeches. No background music. Only the beat of hand drums. The sound of flutes. And stories passed through breath. Of a woman and a gray horse. Who had changed the fate of a land. Storm stood at the edge of the fire circle. He looked in, then turned away, leading his herd deeper into the forest. Citlali watched him go. She did not cry. She simply placed her hand over her chest, where her heart beat in time with the hoofbeats. Not of the horse, but of the forest. Because some souls don't come to stay. They come to remind us. Freedom is not in holding on, but in knowing when to let go. Some stories are not meant to be written in ink, but carried on the wind. No monuments were ever built for Citlali. No bridle could ever hold Storm. But somewhere between the boundary of human and wild, there was a moment where both paused, looked at each other, and nodded. Not in victory, but in understanding. If one day you pass through Black Mesa, stop, listen to the wind whispering through stone. Look down, not to find footprints, but simply to notice. Perhaps in the first light of dawn, you'll catch the blur of a hoofprint, or a single gray hair caught on a branch. And you'll understand, some beings were never meant to be rescued, only left alone, because true freedom always knows its way home.